I didn't marry him for love. I married him so my father could breathe another day. The rain that night didn't fall, it pressed against the windows like it wanted in, like it knew what was about to happen inside apartment 3B. I remember the clock blinking 11:17 p.m. in dull red numbers, the kind that made everything feel like a countdown. My hands were shaking, not from fear, not yet, but from the silence. The kind of silence that stretches too long, like something is waiting just outside your door. My name is Emily Carter. I was 23 years old, working 2 jobs, barely covering rent, and pretending everything was fine while my father slowly sank under a debt he never explained. I used to believe problems had solutions. That night, I learned some problems come with contracts instead. The knock didn't sound like a knock. It was controlled. Measured. Like whoever stood on the other side already owned the room. My father froze. I saw it in the way his shoulders locked, the way his glass stopped halfway to his lips. "Don't open it," he whispered, but the door was already unlocking. Not breaking. Unlocking. Like they had permission. 3 men stepped in, all in dark suits that fit too well for this neighborhood, their shoes clean despite the rain. And then he walked in last. Victor Romano. 65 years old, silver at his temples, posture straight like time had learned not to bend him. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The room adjusted around him. "Marcus Carter," he said, like he'd said the name 1,000 times before. My father tried to stand straighter, but it didn't work. "Mr. Romano. I was going to call, you've had 6 months to call." His voice wasn't loud. It was precise. Every word landed exactly where it needed to. My heart started beating faster then. Not because of what he said, but because of how calm he was saying it. Calm meant control. And control meant we had none. His eyes moved to me. Not rushed. Not curious. Evaluating. Like he was reading a line in a contract he hadn't decided to sign yet. "You didn't mention your daughter," he said. I felt something shift in the air. My father stepped forward, too fast, too desperate. "She has nothing to do with this." Victor didn't look at him. He kept looking at me. "Everything becomes my business when I'm owed." That's when I heard the number. $2 million. It didn't make sense. It couldn't. We could barely afford groceries last week. I laughed. I actually laughed, because my brain refused to accept something that big could exist in our world. But no one else laughed. Victor tilted his head slightly, watching me like I had just confirmed something for him. "You think this is a joke?" he asked softly. I shook my head, but I couldn't speak. My throat felt tight, like the air had been taken out of the room. My father dropped to a chair. Just dropped. Like the weight of the number had finally found him. "I can pay," he said weakly. "I just need time." Victor smiled, but it wasn't warm. It was patient. Time is the one thing I don't extend twice. Silence again. But this time it was different. He wasn't waiting. He was deciding. And somehow, I knew before he spoke that whatever came next would change everything. "There are alternatives," he said. His gaze never left mine. My stomach dropped. I didn't know why. Not yet. But something inside me already understood. My father shook his head violently. "No. No, we're not doing that. You don't get to decide the terms anymore." Victor took a step closer. Just one. But it felt like the entire room moved with him. "Debt is always paid." I don't remember thinking. I don't remember weighing options. I remember one thing, my father's face. The way he looked smaller than I had ever seen him. And I stepped forward. "Take me instead." The words came out steady. too steady for how loud my heart was beating. Victor didn't react right away. That was the worst part. He just looked at me. Long enough to make me question everything I had just said. And then, slowly, he nodded. "Good," he said. "Now we're negotiating something worth my time." And just like that, my life stopped being mine. I thought the hardest part would be saying the words out loud, but I was wrong. The hardest part was how quickly everything after that stopped feeling like a choice. Victor Romano did not rush. He turned slightly toward one of the men behind him and gave a small nod, nothing dramatic, nothing loud, but it moved everything forward like a switch had been flipped. One of them stepped outside, already on the phone, already arranging something I could not see yet but could feel closing in around me. My father stood up too fast, knocking his chair back with a sharp scrape against the floor. "No," he said, louder now, his voice cracking under pressure. "She does not understand what she is saying." I did not look at him. If I did, I knew I would hesitate, and hesitation felt dangerous in a room where every second seemed calculated. "I understand," I said quietly, even though my chest felt tight, even though my hands were still trembling at my sides. Victor studied me again, longer this time, like he was measuring something deeper than my words. "You are young," he said. 23. It was not a question. Yes. And you are offering yourself in place of a $2 million obligation. I swallowed. Saying it like that made it sound unreal again, like numbers that belonged in someone else's life. Yes. My father shook his head, running his hands through his hair like he could undo the moment. "Emily, stop. This is not how this works." Victor finally shifted his gaze to him, just for a second, and it was enough to silence the room again. "This is exactly how it works," he said. Not harsh. Not loud. Final. Then he looked back at me. "Stand up straight." I blinked, confused for a second before realizing I had been leaning slightly, like my body was trying to retreat even when my feet refused to move. I straightened. My shoulders back. My chin lifted just enough to meet his eyes. Something changed in his expression then. Not softer. But, interested. "You do not look away," he observed. "Should I?" I asked before I could stop myself. One of the men behind him shifted, like the question itself had crossed a line, but Victor's lips curved just slightly. Not quite a smile. "Most people do." "I am not most people," I said, and for a second, I almost believed it. The room went quiet again, but this time it felt different. Less like waiting. More like something being decided. Victor stepped closer. Stopping just a few feet away. Close enough that I could see the faint lines around his eyes, the kind that came from years of watching, calculating, surviving. "Do you know what marriage to me means?" he asked. My heart pounded harder. "No, it means your life changes completely," he said. "Your name. Your home. Your future. Everything becomes tied to mine." He let that settle, watching for a reaction. I felt fear rise in my chest, sharp and sudden, but I forced myself to hold still. "And my father's debt?" I asked. "Erased," he said simply. My father let out a broken sound behind me, something between relief and despair. I closed my eyes for just a second. One breath. In. Out. When I opened them again, I nodded. "Then I accept." Victor did not hesitate this time. "Good," he said. Another small nod. Another silent command. "You will pack what you need," he continued. "You have 1 hour. 1 hour. 60 minutes to leave everything I had ever known behind. My apartment. My job. My life." My father stepped toward me again, his voice softer now, desperate in a different way. "Emily, please. I turned to him finally. His eyes were red, his hands shaking worse than mine. For a moment, I saw every version of him at once. The father who used to carry me on his shoulders. The man who had slowly disappeared into debts and silence. The person I was trying to save. "It is already done," I whispered. When I turned back, Victor was still watching me, like he was waiting for doubt to appear. It did not. Not on the surface. He gave one final nod. "Then let us begin." And just like that, my past became something I had already lost. The drive to his world did not feel real, like I had stepped into a version of my life that belonged to someone else and was only borrowing my name. I sat in the back seat of a black car that smelled faintly of leather and something expensive I could not identify, my small bag resting on my lap like it still mattered what I had chosen to bring. Outside, the city lights blurred past the window, familiar streets slowly giving way to places I had only ever seen from a distance. No one spoke. Not the driver. Not the man sitting beside him. And not Victor Romano, who sat across from me, his posture unchanged, his presence filling the space even in silence. I kept my hands folded tightly together, watching the reflection of my own face in the glass. I looked the same. Same brown hair. Same tired eyes. But something was different. Something had already shifted, and I could feel it settling in my chest like a weight I could not put down. After what felt like an hour, maybe more, the car slowed. The gates appeared first. Tall. Black. Opening without hesitation as we approached, like they had been expecting us. Of course they had. Everything here was expected. Controlled. The driveway stretched longer than I anticipated, lined with lights that illuminated the path in soft gold. The house, if it could even be called that, came into view slowly. It was not just large. It was deliberate. Every window lit. Every line clean. Not for comfort. For presence. The car came to a stop, and for a second, no one moved. Then Victor spoke. "We are here." His voice was calm, the same tone he had used all night, like nothing about this moment required emphasis. The door opened from the outside before I could reach for it. One of the men stood there, waiting. Not impatient. Just ready. I stepped out, my shoes touching smooth stone instead of cracked pavement, the air cooler here, quieter, like the outside world had been left behind at the gates. I looked up at the house again, trying to understand what it meant to belong to a place like this. I could not. Not yet. Victor stepped out beside me, adjusting his jacket slightly, a small motion that somehow made everything feel more formal. "You will be taken to your room," he said. Not asked. Not suggested. "Tomorrow, we will discuss the details." Details. The word felt too small for what this was. I nodded anyway. Yes. A woman appeared at the doorway, older, composed, her expression neutral but not unkind. "This way," she said gently. I hesitated for just a second, glancing back. Victor was already walking toward the entrance, not looking to see if I followed, not checking if I understood. He assumed I would. And I did. Inside, the space felt even. Larger, ceilings high enough to make my voice feel like it would disappear if I spoke. The floors reflected the light above, everything polished, untouched, perfect in a way that made me afraid to move too quickly. The woman led me down a long hallway, past closed doors, past silence that felt intentional. Finally, she stopped and opened one. "This will be your room." I stepped inside slowly. It was bigger than my entire apartment. A bed that looked untouched. A window that overlooked the grounds. A closet that could hold more than I owned in my entire life. I set my bag down carefully, like I needed permission to place it there. The woman gave me a small nod before leaving, closing the door behind her with a quiet click that echoed louder than it should have. I stood there for a moment, alone, letting the silence settle. Then I walked to the window. The gates were barely visible from here, just a distant outline. Too far to matter. Too far to reach. I pressed my hand lightly against the glass, feeling the cool surface beneath my fingers. I had chosen this. That was what I kept telling myself. This was not something done to me. This was something I had stepped into. But as I stood there, looking out at a world I no longer belonged to, one thought kept repeating in the back of my mind. I did not know the rules of this place. And I did not know what would happen if I broke them. Morning did not arrive gently in that house. It arrived precisely, like everything else. I woke up before I understood where I was, my body still expecting the faint hum of traffic outside my old apartment, the uneven rhythm of a place that never really rested. Instead, there was silence. Complete. Heavy. It pressed against my ears until I sat up, blinking at the unfamiliar ceiling above me. For a second, I thought it had all been a dream. Then I saw the room again. The polished surfaces. The untouched bedspread. The bag I had placed carefully near the chair like it might disappear if I did not keep it close. And it all came back at once. The door. The offer. The word yes that had changed everything. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, my feet touching the floor slowly, like I needed to test if it was real. It was colder than I expected. Grounding. I walked to the window again, pulling the curtain back just enough to let light in. The ground stretched farther than I could see clearly, trimmed and controlled, every detail intentional. No signs of the city. No noise. Just distance. A soft knock came at the door. Not loud. Not demanding. Controlled. "Miss Carter," a voice said from the other side. "You are expected downstairs in 30 minutes. Expected. Not invited." I turned toward the door, my chest tightening slightly. "Okay," I replied, my voice steady even if I did not feel it. When the footsteps faded, I exhaled slowly, running my hands through my hair like I could prepare myself for something I did not fully understand yet. I moved toward the closet, hesitating before opening it. Inside, rows of clothes hung perfectly arranged, none of them mine. Dresses. Blouses. Shoes lined up beneath them. Everything in my size. Everything chosen without asking me. I reached out, brushing my fingers against the fabric. Soft. Expensive. Unfamiliar. This was not a gift. It was a statement. I chose a simple outfit, something that felt less like I was playing a role, even though I already was. By the time I stepped into the hallway, the house was awake but quiet, like it functioned without needing noise. The same woman from last night appeared again, as composed as before. "This way," she said, guiding me down the long corridor. My footsteps sounded too loud against the floor, like I had not learned how to exist here yet. We reached a large dining room, sunlight filtering through tall windows, illuminating a table set with precision. Victor Romano was already there. Of course he was. He stood as I entered, not out of politeness, but acknowledgement. Like I had stepped into something official. "You are on time," he said. I did not want to be late. "Good," he replied, taking his seat again. I sat across from him, keeping my posture straight, my hands resting carefully in my lap. A plate was placed in front of me, breakfast I had not asked for but suddenly realized I needed. I had not eaten since yesterday. "You will learn quickly," Victor said, his voice calm as he poured coffee into his cup. "This house runs on order." I nodded slightly. "I understand." He looked at me over the rim of his cup, studying my face like he was searching for something I had not revealed yet. "Do you?" he asked. The question lingered longer than it should have. I hesitated, just for a second. "I understand that I am here because I agreed to be." He set the cup down carefully. And that agreement comes with expectations. My heart picked up again, but I held his gaze. What expectations? He leaned back slightly, his expression unreadable but focused. You will carry my name, he said. You will represent this family with respect. And you will follow the rules of this house. Rules again. Always rules. And if I do not? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Not challenging. Just honest. Something shifted in his eyes then, something sharper, not anger, but awareness. You will not ask that question again, he said quietly. Not threatening. Not raised. But absolute. The room felt smaller suddenly, the air heavier. I nodded once. Understood. He watched me for another moment, then gave a slight nod, like I had passed something I did not know I was being tested on. There is one more thing, he added. I waited, my fingers tightening slightly against my lap. You will meet my son today. The word landed differently than everything else he had said. Son. Something new. Something I had not prepared for. I lifted my eyes to his. Your heir, he continued. And the only person in this house who does not follow my rules as easily. A pause. Just long enough to make me feel it. He will not like you. I felt my breath catch slightly, not from fear, but from the certainty in his voice. Why? Victor's expression did not change, but something colder settled beneath it. Because you are not supposed to be here. The silence that followed was heavier than anything else that morning. And for the first time since I stepped into that house, I realized this was not just about surviving him. It was about surviving everyone connected to him. I did not expect to feel nervous again, but I did. Not the kind of fear that had followed me into this house, not the sharp, immediate kind that came with decisions that could not be undone, but something quieter, more unpredictable. Anticipation. The kind that builds in your chest when you know something is about to shift, but you do not know how. After breakfast, I was not told where to go. No instructions. No schedule. Just silence again, like the house was waiting to see what I would do without being told. I walked slowly through the halls, aware of every step, every turn, every door that remained closed. This place was not just large. It was layered. Like every room held something I was not meant to see yet. I paused near a set of tall windows, looking out over the grounds again, trying to ground myself in something familiar, even if it was just the idea of distance. That was when I heard it. A voice. Low. Calm. Not Victor. Different. Younger. It came from somewhere behind me, from a room I had passed without noticing. You are in the wrong part of the house. I turned slowly. He was standing in the doorway now, like he had been there longer than I realized. Luca Romano. I knew it without needing to be told. He looked nothing like I expected and exactly like I feared. Tall. Composed. His presence quieter than his father's, but no less controlled. His eyes studied me with a kind of focus that made it feel like he was not just seeing me, but measuring something beneath the surface. I was not aware there were parts one was not allowed in, I said, keeping my voice even though my pulse had picked up again. He stepped forward slightly, not closing the distance completely, but enough to make it clear he was choosing where the line was. There are, he replied. No anger. No raised tone. Just certainty. I nodded once. Then I will remember that. For a moment, neither of us moved. The silence between us felt different from the silence in the rest of the house. Sharper. Like something was forming in it. His gaze dropped briefly to my hands, then back to my face. You agreed to this? He asked. The question caught me off guard, not because of what he asked, but because of how he asked it. Not accusing. Not dismissive. Curious. I held his gaze. Yes. He exhaled slightly, not frustrated, but not convinced either. Why? That question felt heavier. I could have said anything. I could have given him the version that made sense. But something about the way he was looking at me made that feel pointless. Because someone had to, I said simply. His expression shifted then. Not softer. But less distant. Like my answer had not been what he expected. That is not how this world works, he said. It is the only way mine did, I replied. Another pause. Longer this time. He studied me again, more carefully now, like he was adjusting whatever conclusion he had already started forming. You think this makes you strong? He asked. I shook my head slightly. No. I think it makes me responsible. That seemed to land differently. He looked away for just a second, like he was considering something he had not planned to. Then his gaze returned to mine. You do not belong here, he said, echoing his father's words, but it sounded different coming from him. Less like a warning. More like a fact he had not decided how to deal with yet. I know, I said quietly. But I am here anyway. Something in the air shifted again. Subtle. But real. He took another step closer, not threatening, not aggressive, just present. Do you know what he expects from you? He asked. I know what he said, I replied. That is not the same thing. I hesitated, just for a second. Then what is it? He held my gaze, and for the first time, I saw something under the surface. Not weakness. Not doubt. Something more complicated. Control, he said. He expects control. The word settled between us, heavier than anything else he had said. I felt it in my chest, in the way my breath slowed slightly as I processed it. And you? I asked before I could stop myself. What do you expect? That was the first time he did not answer right away. His expression did not change, but his silence did. It stretched, deliberate, like he was deciding how much of the truth to give me. Finally, he stepped back, creating distance again. Resetting whatever had just formed. I expect you to regret it, he said. And then he turned. Walking away without another word, leaving me standing there with a feeling I could not quite name, but knew would not go away. I did not move right away after he left. His words stayed in the space longer than he did, settling into the quiet like they belonged there. I expect you to regret it. The sentence repeated in my head, not loud, not overwhelming, but persistent, like it was waiting for something to prove it right. I let out a slow breath and looked down at my hands, noticing how steady they had become. That surprised me. I thought I would still be shaking. Instead, I felt alert. Like something inside me had shifted from reacting to watching. Learning. That was when I understood something important. This house was not just about rules. It was about reading people before they spoke. I turned and walked back down the hallway, slower this time, more aware of where I stepped, of what I noticed. The silence was no longer empty. It was information. Doors that stayed closed. Footsteps that never echoed twice. People who appeared only when needed and disappeared just as quickly. Everything here had purpose. Including me. By the time I returned to the main floor, I saw Victor again, standing near a large window, his hands clasped behind his back as he looked out over the grounds. He did not turn when I approached. You met him, he said. Not a question. I stopped a few feet behind him. Yes. A pause. And, he asked. I considered my answer carefully. This felt like another test, even if it was not obvious. He does not agree with this, I said. Victor gave a slight nod, like that confirmed something he already knew. He rarely agrees with me, he replied. There was no frustration in his voice. No irritation. Just fact. I stepped a little closer, enough to stand beside him, though not fully aligned. He thinks I will regret it. That made Victor turn. Slowly. His eyes met mine, studying me again with that same measured intensity. Will you? He asked. The question landed differently this time. Not as a challenge. As an evaluation. I held his gaze. I do not know yet, I answered honestly. Something shifted in his expression, subtle but real. Approval, maybe. Or interest. Honesty is useful, he said. But it is not always safe. I nodded slightly. Neither is this. His lips curved just slightly at that, not quite a smile, but enough to change the air between us. You are learning, he said. He turned back to the window, but his attention had not left the conversation. Luca sees weakness where others see sacrifice, he continued. He believes this arrangement makes you vulnerable. I crossed my arms lightly, not defensive, just grounding myself. Does it? Victor did not answer immediately. He watched something outside for a moment, like he was aligning his thoughts before speaking. That depends, he said finally, on whether you remain what you were when you walked in. I felt that settle in my chest. Not heavy. Not sharp. Just clear. And what do I become instead? I asked. This time, he turned fully, facing me. The space between us felt intentional again, measured. Someone who understands the cost of every decision, he said. Someone who does not hesitate when it matters. His gaze held mine, steady, unyielding. Someone who cannot be controlled by fear. The word control echoed back to me from my conversation with Luca. It connected something I had not fully seen before. Two perspectives. Same truth. Different meanings. I lowered my arms slowly, letting the tension in my shoulders ease just enough to think clearly. And if I do not become that? I asked quietly. Victor's expression did not change, but something colder settled behind it. Not threatening. Just certain. Then this house will decide who you are for you. Silence followed, but it did not feel empty. It felt like a line had been drawn. Not on the floor. In the air. In the choices I had already made. I nodded once, not because I agreed, but because I understood. He studied me for one last moment, then gave a slight nod of his own, like something had been confirmed again. You will attend dinner tonight, he said. With us. Us. The word carried weight now. Not just him. Not just me. Something larger. Something more complicated. I inhaled slowly, steadying myself. I will be there. He turned away again, the conversation ending as cleanly as it had begun. And as I stood there, watching the reflection of both of us in the glass, I realized something I had not admitted to myself before. This was no longer about surviving the choice I made. It was about becoming someone who could live with it. Dinner did not feel like a meal. It felt like a test I had not studied for, in a room designed to make sure I understood that. I stood in front of the mirror longer than I needed to, adjusting a dress that was not mine, smoothing fabric that had been chosen without asking me, watching a version of myself I was still trying to recognize. The woman in the reflection looked composed. Still. Controlled. She did not look like someone who had traded her life for a debt less than 24 hours ago. That was the point, I realized. This house did not change what you felt. It changed what you showed. A soft knock came at the door, precise as always. It is time, the same calm voice from earlier said. I nodded to myself, even though no one could see it, and turned toward the door. The hallway felt quieter tonight, heavier somehow, like the house itself was aware of what this dinner meant. When I entered the dining room, both of them were already there. Victor stood at the head of the table, his posture unchanged, his presence steady as ever. Luca was seated to his right, one arm resting casually on the table, though nothing about him felt casual. His eyes lifted the moment I stepped in, and I felt that same sharp awareness from earlier, like he was already assessing what had changed since the last time he saw me. Victor gestured slightly. Sit. I moved to the chair across from Luca, aware of every step, every movement, every second that stretched longer than it should have. The table was set perfectly. 3 places. No more. No less. No distractions. Just us. I sat, placing my hands lightly in my lap, keeping my posture straight the way I had practiced without realizing it. For a moment, no one spoke. The silence was not uncomfortable. It was intentional. Finally, Victor took his seat, and that was when the dinner truly began. You will learn quickly, he said, his voice calm as he reached for his glass. This family does not rely on words when actions are clearer. I glanced at Luca briefly. He had not taken his eyes off me. Then I suppose I should pay attention, I replied. His gaze sharpened slightly, like he had not expected that answer. Victor noticed it too. I saw it in the faint shift of his expression. Good, he said. Because tonight, you will. The first course was placed in front of us, quiet, efficient, almost invisible in how it happened. I realized I had not seen anyone enter or leave. Even that was controlled. I reached for my fork, steady, deliberate, refusing to let my hands betray anything. Tell me, Victor continued, his attention returning fully to me. What did you learn today? The question felt simple. It was not. I considered it carefully, aware that both of them were watching now. Not just listening. Watching. That this house runs on more than rules, I said slowly. It runs on understanding what is not said. Luca's expression shifted again. Subtle. But I saw it. Victor nodded once. And, he prompted. I met his gaze. And that everyone here sees things differently, even when they are looking at the same situation. Silence followed. Not empty. Measuring. Then Luca leaned back slightly, his voice entering the conversation for the first time since I sat down. And what do you think you are in that situation? He asked. His tone was calm, but there was something underneath it. Not hostility. Not exactly. Something sharper. I did not look away. A variable, I answered. His eyebrow lifted just slightly, like that had caught his attention more than he expected. A variable, he repeated. That is an interesting way to describe yourself. It is accurate, I said. I change the outcome depending on how I am treated. The words settled into the space between us, heavier than I intended, but I did not take them back. Victor watched both of us now, his gaze moving from me to Luca, then back again. There was something there. Something I did not fully understand yet, but I could feel it building. Luca leaned forward slightly, resting his hands on the table, his focus entirely on me now. You think you have that kind of influence? He asked. I held his gaze, steady. I think I have more than you expected. For a moment, the room went completely still. Then Victor spoke, his voice cutting through the silence with quiet precision. That, he said, is exactly why you are here. I felt the weight of that settle deeper than anything else that night. Not because of what it meant, but because of how certain he sounded. And as I sat there, between power and resistance, I realized something that neither of them had said out loud. This dinner was not about acceptance. It was about positioning. And I had just stepped onto a board where every move would matter. The silence after Victor's words did not fade. It deepened. Like something invisible had settled over the table, pressing down on every movement, every breath, every thought I was trying to keep steady. I lowered my gaze briefly to the plate in front of me, not to avoid them, but to give myself a second to think. Positioning. That was what this was. Not acceptance. Not rejection. Something more precise. I picked up my glass, taking a small sip, letting the cool water ground me before I looked back up. Luca had not moved. His eyes were still on me, sharper now, more focused, like he had shifted from observing to evaluating. "You speak like you have already adapted," he said. His tone was calm, but there was something underneath it. Not doubt. Not quite. Something closer to testing. I set the glass down carefully. "I speak like I understand what happens if I do not," I replied. His jaw tightened slightly, almost unnoticeable, but I saw it. Victor did too. I knew that without looking at him. "Understanding is not the same as surviving," Luca said. I held his gaze. "Then I will learn both." The words came out steadier than I felt, but that was the point. Control. That was the word both of them had circled around all day. Control of the room. Control of the moment. Control of myself. Victor leaned back slightly, his attention moving between us, not interrupting, not interfering. Watching. Always watching. "You are assuming you will be given time to learn," Luca continued. I tilted my head slightly, considering that. "No," I said. "I am assuming I will take it." That shifted something again. Not just in him. In the room. It was subtle, but I felt it, like the air had changed direction. Luca's expression did not soften, but it did change. Less dismissive. More deliberate. "That is not how things are taken here," he said. "Everything is given. Or it is removed." The words landed heavier than anything else he had said, not because of what they implied, but because of how certain he sounded. I leaned forward slightly, mirroring his earlier movement without realizing it. "Then I will make myself something that cannot be removed," I said quietly. For a second, no one spoke. The silence stretched again, but this time it felt different. Not testing. Not waiting. Something closer to recognition. Victor finally moved, setting his glass down with quiet precision. "Enough," he said. Not sharply. Just enough to shift the direction of the moment. Luca leaned back again, but his eyes did not leave mine. Not once. "You are playing a dangerous game," he said. I did not look away. "I did not come here to play." That seemed to land harder than I expected. His gaze held mine for a second longer, then finally, he looked away. Just for a moment. But it was enough. Victor noticed it too. I saw it in the slight change in his posture, the almost imperceptible shift of approval that passed through him before disappearing again. Dinner continued after that, but something had changed. The conversation moved to other things, quieter things, controlled things, but the tension did not leave the room. It settled instead, like a foundation being laid beneath everything else. When the plates were cleared and the silence returned once more, Victor stood first. That was the signal. The end. "You did well," he said, his gaze resting on me just long enough to make sure I heard it. Not praise. Not encouragement. A statement. I stood as well, my movements slower now, more deliberate. Luca remained seated for a second longer, then stood too, but his attention had already shifted inward, like he was processing something he had not expected. As Victor turned to leave, he paused just slightly. "This house does not change for anyone," he said without looking back. "But sometimes, it reacts." The words lingered after he was gone. Luca remained where he was for a moment longer, then looked at me again. Not with the same sharpness as before. Something had shifted there. Something quieter. "You should be careful," he said. Not as a warning. Not as a threat. Something else. I met his gaze one last time. "I am," I replied. He studied me for a second, then gave a slight nod, almost to himself, before turning and walking away. And as I stood there alone again, in a room that no longer felt unfamiliar, I realized something I had not understood before. I was not just adapting to this house. I was changing how it responded to me. And that was far more dangerous than anything I had expected. That night did not end when I left the dining room. It followed me. In the way my footsteps echoed softer now, like the house had adjusted to my presence. In the way the doors no longer felt like boundaries, but like choices I had not yet learned how to make. I walked slowly back to my room, not because I was tired, but because I was thinking. Every word. Every look. Every pause. It all mattered here. And for the first time, I was not just reacting to it. I was beginning to understand it. When I reached my door, I did not go inside immediately. I rested my hand against the handle, feeling the cool metal under my palm, grounding myself in something simple before stepping back into a space that already felt different than it had this morning. I pushed the door open and stepped inside, closing it behind me with a quiet click that sounded louder than it should have. The room was exactly the same. Nothing moved. Nothing changed. And yet, everything felt different. I walked toward the window again, drawn to it without thinking, and looked out at the grounds below. The lights were dimmer now, softer, casting long shadows across the paths that had seemed so precise earlier. It did not look like a place of control from up here. It looked like something else. Something waiting. I folded my arms lightly, letting out a slow breath I did not realize I had been holding. You handled yourself well. The voice came from behind me, quiet but clear. I turned instantly, my pulse jumping before I could stop it. Luca stood just inside the door, like he had been there long enough to observe before speaking. I had not heard it open. I had not heard him enter. That bothered me more than it should have. You should not come in without knocking, I said, my voice steady even as I adjusted to his presence. He closed the door behind him without looking away. You are right, he said. But this house does not follow rules it does not respect. I frowned slightly, not in confusion, but in recognition. And you do not respect that one. No, he replied simply. He took a step further into the room, not invading, not closing the distance completely, just enough to make it clear he was not leaving yet. You surprised him tonight, he continued. That is not easy to do. I turned back toward the window briefly, considering that. I was not trying to, I said. That is why it worked. I looked at him again, studying his expression more carefully now. There was less resistance there than before. Not gone. But changed. You said I would regret this, I reminded him. He did not deny it. I still think you will. Then why are you here? The question came out before I could filter it, but I did not regret asking. He paused. Not long. But enough to make it real. Because I do not think you understand what you have stepped into, he said. Then explain it. He exhaled slightly, like that was not as simple as it sounded. This is not just about him, he said. Or you. Or the arrangement you made. His gaze held mine, steady now, not testing, not pushing. Just, direct. This is about everything connected to him. Every decision. Every alliance. Every expectation. I felt that settle in, heavier than anything he had said before. Not fear. Not exactly. Something more, expansive. And where do I fit into that? I asked quietly. His expression shifted again, but this time it was different. Less guarded. More certain. That is the problem, he said. You do not fit. The words should have felt like rejection. Instead, they felt like something else. Like a truth that had not yet decided what it meant. I tilted my head slightly, studying him. The same way he had studied me all day. Then maybe I am not supposed to fit, I said. Silence followed. Not heavy. Not sharp. Just, open. He watched me for a long second, like he was seeing something he had not expected to see when this began. That kind of thinking will either protect you, he said slowly, or destroy you. I held his gaze, steady. Then I will make sure it protects me. He did not respond right away. Instead, he nodded once, almost to himself, like he had reached a conclusion he was not ready to say out loud. Then he stepped back, creating space again, resetting the distance between us. Get some rest, he said. Tomorrow will not be easier. He turned toward the door, pausing just long enough to add, and do not mistake tonight for progress. I watched him, waiting. What is it, then? I asked. His hand rested on the door, but he did not open it yet. A shift, he said. And shifts like this, always come with a cost. Then he left, the door closing softly behind him, leaving me alone again in a room that no longer felt like a place to rest. I turned back to the window one last time, looking out at the quiet grounds below, at the shadows that seemed deeper now, more defined. I had made a decision to save someone else. That was how this started. But as I stood there, feeling the weight of everything that had already changed, I realized something I could not ignore anymore. I was no longer just paying a debt. I was becoming part of something that would demand far more than I had ever planned to give.